Thank you so much, Tahira, for giving me time and to have this conversation. Just making a list of all of the things you do.
Right.
Writer, director, author, fundamentally storyteller. Is that how you see yourself?
Yes, absolutely. That's who I am.
That's who you are.
Yeah.
You know, I've just noticed on your Instagram that you started putting up poetry.
Yes.
Is that your way of politely saying or politely putting into the world what you really want to say?
True, इतना budget तो मुझे कोई दे नहीं रहा कि मैं फिल्में बनाती रहूं throughout the year. So there is just one odd film that you get to make in about like 1 or 2 or 3 years. Because as a director, that's what you can do. And so for the rest of the time, I try to use my Instagram to share what I feel. And somewhere down the line, of course, there's always a subliminal message. Those people who can catch on to it, great. And those people who can't, they just appreciate the poetry and are happy.
Is it tough to wait between projects?
The waiting time. Yes, I think it gets to you, but patience is the name of the game, I think. And yeah, I enjoy writing. Yeah, so if some script is at the developing phase or the other script is at the pitching phase, then I'm already writing and thinking of more things to do. So yes, of course, waiting is a big part. And apart from waiting, then putting the entire thing together also takes time, you know. So for actors and people who just come on board, it's something that they do for 30, 40 days or 50 days of their lives, unless and until it's a very big project. But for the director, it's something that they live with for a long period of time. There is a pre-production, production, post-production, and before pre-production, for me, because I write my scripts also, it's a process which is taken about 2-3 years, you know. So yeah, it's a process I enjoy actually.
Actually, it's really interesting for me because, I mean, I've worked in live news and daily news where the cycle is a couple of hours. I mean, something happens, you immediately have to put out your content, you figure out whether it works or not, and then you move on to the next thing.
Right.
So the idea of gestating something for 4 years before you actually have a finished product.
Feel like an elephant. Takes forever to produce. So yeah.
And do you know, I mean, as a first-time director, when you were directing a film, did you know that, okay, I've got something, this is good. When it comes out, people will love it? Or is there a fear of, oh my God?
No, there's excitement and देखो fear उनको होता है जिनके पास बहुत कुछ खोने को होता है. बहुत सारी फिल्में बना दी है, बहुत legacy बन चुकी है, so now they're fearful. For me, I was a new kid on the block. I was excited. I was very passionate. And I think my voice was, and I would consider it to be unique. And so the story that I written, which was Sharma Ji Ki Beti, which was a feature film, and before that I had done a lot of short films as well. But this one, I think it stood for its content. I think producers also loved it, and later on it got a lot of love at film festivals, and then later on at the platform that it released. And it was a fairly new voice, fairly new stories that were told, which somehow we don't think are new because we live it on an everyday basis, but perhaps new because it was shown for the first time in a way that it was shown. So I think that was exciting.
Is there a market you feel now for films that are made for the female audience?
The female audience never sort of distinguishes or decides मैं आज एक male oriented film देखने जा रही हूँ या एक female oriented film देखने जा रही हूँ. Why should the men also feel कि, you know, this is a female oriented film and I should not watch it? For what it's worth, it's going to be a wonderful experience. Give it a chance, you know. And I want to make cinema which is for everyone. Very honestly, of course, I feel very strongly for women and there's a strong feminist voice there. But do I only want women to hear or listen to my stories? No. And say it's only, the purpose is fulfilled only if the other gender also watches it, because it's primarily for them to empathize. And if they can do it while having fun and while being entertained and enjoyed, why not? So my aim is, even the stories I've started writing on Write the Poetry and everything, I want everyone to listen to it without sort of segregating an audience. Not because I'm neglecting and not because I want them, but I want, if I want to change and if I want to add value, it needs to go to each and every one. And we need to empathize each other on a human level, irrespective of genders.
Do you get pushback when you're pitching your projects? You're like, you know, what is? Tell me some of the things that.
So there is this script that I had which had a female lead, and people really liked it when I was switching to, but they wanted me to switch. तो female character को आप male character बना दो. So I also understand where they're coming from. You know, Faye, I don't hold anyone responsible right now. I don't hold the producers responsible. I don't hold anyone responsible, because by the end of it, no matter how woke or how different kind of stories the producers also want to tell, but if the viewers are not going to come and watch, how are they going to put money on it, you know? So I think the change lies with everyone who's endorsing cinema, who's watching. You need to be open as audiences to watch women do variety of roles, from being a spy to a killer. She just can't be someone who is pretty and damsel in distress, you know. Of course, we do have such anomalies, but how many? Like Gangubai was one. After that, I don't know, very less. Crew, again, was a fun film. But you can literally count. But when it comes to the films that are led by men, it's countless. So the idea is to change something at the core level where we find women to be exciting performers, exciting filmmakers, exciting voice to see and hear, rather than just trying to see कि अच्छा ये तो अब कुछ अपना रोना धोना ही निकालेगी. निकाले यार, वो भी सुनो, पर कुछ और भी तो बोल सकते हैं वो भी सुनो.
So this is the thing that I find interesting about films as well, right? Right now, even in politics, they have realized that the women vote is enough in numbers to turn a whole election.
Imagine.
So how come it's not working in entertainment, where we're not saying, hey, there are enough women who will watch this?
Yeah.
Because it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
It's something that they will enjoy. They
Right.
will be able to identify with the characters. Let's encourage more of these scripts.
I think it's all connected, like you said yourself before we just took on board.
Yeah.
That, a lot of families, it's the men who decide what film they want to watch, which film they want to watch.
Still, you feel?
I mean to say, if I'm just talking about living in a bubble and saying Bombay, but there is whole of India, where there's a lot of rural India, where there's B and C tier cities also, and then there is, of course, it's a patriarchal country, in fact, a patriarchal world. And there are few states where, of course, there's matriarchy. But at the same time, the voice of the man is held with more, there's more gravitas to what he says by the end of it. And it's his last word. But not perhaps for every family. But majority, this is what is happening in meetings and boardrooms and discussions and budgets and everywhere. It's just everywhere, trickles down everywhere. So, yeah, I guess when everything is just so connected, how we're talking about this and how it trickles down to enjoying a film and choosing which film to watch or not. And if you're on a tight budget, especially now, with the films are so expensive to watch also in theaters. Yeah. Especially in the north and the west. So if it's becoming more expensive for them to watch, then it's one person who's going to take probably an opinion or a choice or a decision. And if happens to be a man, then probably you'll go end up watching some testosterone-ridden film.
Do you believe the films are too expensive right now? That the multiplexes are too expensive and it's breaking the model a little bit?
Yeah, because there are fewer films being made right now. Again, it's a connected cycle. The exhibitors, the producers, we are watching. So if there's just going to be a little bit, because I'm not a producer, I'm a director. So I'm just speaking from what I'm hearing and what I'm listening, and why some projects are shelved and why some projects are taking off is because it's a renaissance which is happening right now. With the platforms coming in, the theatricals took a backseat, and now with the theatricals coming in, the OTTs have just now been limited to one or two platforms because the others have also shut down, or they're sort of choosing what. So it's all very, it's a place and a time where it's exciting because you get to make more kinds of films which can actually go to OTT, but the OTT are also not taking that because they're also following the theatrical formula. The idea of OTTs was actually to give chance to people like me and other people, right? Yes. Where you can make films with people with newer cast, with just some
different ideas.
Different ideas, and it's not very expensive, and people get to watch different things, but it's just become a replica of the theatricals which are happening. They just want to work with they would want to work with the A-listers, and this is not just limited to the faces. Somehow they want the same kind of director, same kind of cinematographer, so it's going to be the same voice. And so then people say, if I can just, a family of 10 can just watch on a subscription on OTT, why do I need to go to the theaters? And so it's all a vicious cycle where everyone is trying to figure their shit around. If I'm allowed to say
yeah,
the word.
of course, you're allowed to say that word.
But yeah, I think by the end of it, if we are going to make some great cinema, and if we are going to make some great films, I think people will come out and watch in the theaters. And perhaps this entire cycle might just sort of be disrupted, where it's becoming an expensive proposition for people of a family of 8 or 5 or 6 to go and watch.
Yeah.
Because the tickets are so high, the popcorn is so expensive. And when you go end up watching 3-4 hours, you do want to eat something. You're just not going to have water and come. Is that an outing for you? Then you might as well. So I think it's all
connected. But that's sad because, when we talk about the fact that when a family goes out and they're spending this much money, it's invariably the man who decides what they will and will not watch. But OTT also gave us that room where it was possible for one person to watch their own thing.
Of course, and they are.
And
there are multiple
a lot
gadgets.
of them, there are multiple gadgets. They're watching on smaller screens, and that created opportunity for different projects, different
Absolutely.
actors.
But then why is the reason that there are lesser choices being made? What is the reason behind few of the fallouts or few of the platforms, just now not there anymore, or the scenes just 1 or 2 players are left? Why? Because if that was the module, then I feel they should have stuck to that. But I think everybody wants more and more and a bit more. And so if you're just going to feed off on the module which was meant for the theaters, how is the voice going to be different? But at the same time, we've got to see some great cinema. We've seen international cinema, our regional cinema. I think we've got to see so much, and that's courtesy of OTTs. And I really wish they flourish. I wish the theaters flourish. But I also feel everybody gives many other people a chance and more voices to be seen and more voices to be heard, because that was the prime idea behind.
I know that both of us are on the board of Women in Film with Guneet.
Yes.
Which is fantastic, because the idea is, like yourself, to bring in more women who are writing, who are directing, who are telling stories, who are behind the camera as well as in front of it. And one of the questions, and I'm genuinely asking this, and I brought it up also when talking to Guneet, was we've just had the Malayalam cinema come out with that massive report of sexual harassment on various stages of sex, right? How can we institutionalize a solution where it's not just the lead actors are being protected, but till the last person on that set finds themselves protected by a mandatory structure saying, you will have a committee that someone can complain to. You will follow this procedure. If you get a complaint, this has to happen on every single set. And I'm sure you've thought about it.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, I think there is a committee. There is what is it called?
The ICC.
Yeah, and apart from that, there's another film. I'm forgetting the term, because I remember when I did that short film with Netflix, it was a mandate for everybody to come on board on the Zoom call, and it was explained to everyone, how you can protect your rights, how it's important to reach out to people if you're sexually harassed or if you're feeling uncomfortable. So it was a protocol and a guideline which was given. And I clearly remember that. So I see it as a part of protocol where every film is being made, but how much of it is followed, how much of it is followed through, how many people come in the front. I guess it is a place where there can be more work done, but it all starts with communication. I think it all starts with expressing. And when the Me Too movement happened, all hell broke loose, and apart from the names that were coming up, there was just too many conversations which were happening, that ab kiska naam aayega, ab kiska naam aayega. And then you're hearing things, and you're also hearing weird stories. But what that Me Too movement did was, of course, whoever was named has been put to shame and has been held accountable, and they have faced the consequences. Many people have been out of work, questionably, and also all of that has been happening. The one good thing has happened, I feel, is that now there's more sense of accountability.
Okay.
Before such an action is taken, I think there was a time, perhaps, as what I've heard stories again, where things were taken for granted, whether it was the behind the scene, whether it was the directors or whether it was people in front of it. They were people who misused the powers that they had and the authority that they had, and some things were not spoken about, and they were just. But after the Me Too, what happened was, I think a visible change that one could hear was that there was more accountability. And what people used to do before, perhaps that reduced overtly. Of course, you want women to come up and, but what can you do, Faye? It's a world, I understand the women also, because many of them did call out and then they haven't gotten work. So if the perpetrators were out of work, so were the victims.
Yeah.
So how is it a fair situation? How is it fair? I mean, so till the time all of us are not okay with someone coming out and not just shaming the perpetrator, but also shaming the victim to such an extent that now she wants to be hidden and now she's not getting work only. To achieve kya kiya humne? You know? How do we protect the women so that they can come forward, ensuring that they will be as respected or as wanted as before in front of the screen,
And not targeted.
And then suddenly they're unwanted.
So there are some arguments now, because some of the people who were accused during India's Me Too movement are now being rehabilitated back into work. Now, there are two sides to this argument, right? On one side, the argument is nothing legal or criminal was filed against this person. There was no police investigation. No court has decided this person is guilty of anything. So why should so-and-so continue to suffer? The other side of the argument is, why would you give work to someone who has been accused of bad behavior? What side of this argument are you on?
Yeah, it's a confused one, right?
Yeah.
See, the strong feminist side of me, it's upsetting that such people are there and you see the same faces back on set and them behaving as if they had done nothing, and there's glorification of their work, of their name and everything. But you know, I am at the stage of life where I'm learning a lot. And I'm learning and I'm consciously trying to be aware of what I feel, and at the same time empathize, not with the perpetrator side of the person, but the humane side of that person, you know. And I might not agree with the politics of that person. I might not agree with the conduct of that person. I might not agree with what he's done, or she has done. But should that person be devoid of another chance of coming back? It's almost like putting the criminals in a jail and then expecting and not sort of giving them a chance ever to improve on themselves as human beings. I just feel I'm torn between this, but it's a great place for me to be in right now, because there was a time when there was no other place except that they should be punished and they should be out of the system, out of the society, out of all that. But right now I'm at a place where doesn't being human mean being evolving, being more aware of your thoughts, words, actions, given chance over and over again to just improve. Now, does that extend to a murderer? Does that extend to a rapist? Does that extend? It's something that we need to think of. And I'm also in that zone of thinking.
It's an interesting argument, right? Because fundamentally, Indian jurisprudence is based on the idea of reform. We don't lock people away forever.
Yes.
They are in, people serve sentences intended to reform them. So the idea is that even if someone has been accused of something that you're saying, they should be given a chance to set things right.
Right. Yes, I guess that in that I'm also fighting that, where like you can see clearly, like, there is a part of me which was like not for reform, because at times you feel that there was too much of black and white for me, right? But I'm also evolving and I am also growing. And like I said, this phase of my life wants to believe and feel that everyone should be given a chance to reform and become better at living, at becoming a human being. So, yeah.
You know, I know that you've been asked about the cancer multiple times.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, what has been your biggest learning?
This.
Just let everybody be.
Be. Bas raho. Just you be and I be, and then
Everybody just be. Just everybody leave everybody alone.
Just be. Yes, everybody leave everybody alone.
They
No. But yes, there's been a big learning. In fact, when it happened in 2018, I very joyously took on to the struggle. Very honestly, I call it joyously because it literally was joyful for me. I'm also very spiritually inclined, and a lot of it might just sound rubbish, but it's how you feel, right? So in 2018 is something I was introduced to a lovely practice, and I was feeling very empowered by that practice. And one of the teachings of that practice was that if something has come to your life, it's come to teach you something and not take away. And I was just going with that, and I shared my, I won't call it struggle, but I shared my experience with everyone. And it had given hope to a lot of people. How many messages I got, how many DMs I got, how many emails I got, how many phone calls I got, random telling me that, my journey where I was dealing, I won't even say fighting, I'm choosing my words now. This is what has happened. So you choose your words, where I'm not calling it a struggle, I call it an experience. I'm not saying that I fought the disease. It was something I dealt with. So that gave a lot of hope to not just me, but a lot of people. But that point of time, I'm a medical student. Very honestly, I wanted to become a doctor. Thankfully, I haven't. But I've done my BSc in biotechnology. And so I'm in my family, for me, everything is very science oriented. अगर सर दर्द है तो आप डोलो लोगे या डिस्प्रिन लोगे या जो भी लोगे, बुखार है तो ये लोगे. I was not into alternate therapy. I was not into anything else. So I was practically going by the textbook. So whatever the doctors told me in 2018, I did all of that. Medically, everything, In fact, chemotherapy for me was optional, but I took it. And now when it's come, now nobody knows whether it's a recurrence or it's a new one. And I haven't also spoken to anyone. Very honestly, you're the first person. And the only first and the last, that'll be like you saying first and last, but first and last kid, first and last. Same. This is the first and last interview where I'll be talking about this. Because I wanted to also speak about this at a place which is very credible and where there's understanding along with empathy and nothing is misconstrued. So this is what I'm sharing now. So when in 2025 it was discovered, the doctors themselves were shocked. And if the doctor who's the head of Tata is saying this was not supposed to happen, then you're also taken aback. Arey bhai, this was not supposed to happen. Then how and when and why? Why has never been a question, very honestly. Neither did I ask why in 2018. Neither did I ask why is almost like implicating कि उसको क्यों नहीं हुआ, मुझे क्यों हुआ, मुझे क्यों. So I don't want to go in that space of why. But I needed to figure that some learning was not fulfilled in 2018, which is why this is happening now. What do I need to learn? What do I need to figure? Which is why I'm in this place of fluidity, like be and let be. I feel when there is a disconnect where you stop feeling, when you just go by the book, there are things, and I know your job. Yeah, your statistics, your everything which is
Evidence.
concrete, evidence. But at the same time, apart from that, there's a lot of things that you feel. So what I mean by that is, say for instance, you're feeling cold, but outside is warm, and the 10 people that you're sitting with, they all are feeling warm. Will that become your truth? Or with what you're feeling right now is your truth? So when you are disconnected with your body and you feel, array 10 people are feeling warm and hot, so it is warm and hot, and you go with that and the AC is still full blast, what happens? You fall sick because you've stopped feeling. We always say, no, we feel, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling hungry, I feel hot, I feel cold, I feel angry, there's a lot of feel. But when you stop feeling, I think there's a disconnect. So what happened with me was I was going with the textbook, but I stopped feeling and I was a disconnect with my body. Well, there's something for me to figure out, but I'm still going by the book. I'm still going by the science of it. I'm still going by the doctor's protocol. But am I creating magic and mysticism in my life? Yes, I am. So am I able to figure out my life and have the doctors change their stance? Yes, I have. So now you ask me how. It's because of consciousness. It's because of awareness. And awareness of your body, your internal environment and external environment. So there is not a single day that goes, or not a protocol that has not been given to me by the doctors, but and I have not felt right about this protocol. I was like, I don't feel this is right for me. I don't feel this is right for me. But the doctors say, you have to take. No, I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm not one of those people who's going to give up the doctor's protocol and start off with some alternate line of therapy. I'm going to do what the science says. But can there be a possibility where the doctor himself changes his stance? I have been able to do that.
Change stance to what?
Say, for instance, chemo. So I was again recommended chemotherapy and I was like, this is not for me this time. This is not for me. I'm very, very sure. And doctor said, how? I said, because I feel it. He's like, bullshit. Obviously I can understand. It's going to be bullshit if... I was like, no, I feel it. That's not meant for me. It's not meant for me. We'll get on another protocol. I feel my body is not ready. He's like, no way, we are going to try and doing it. So fine, we go for the first session of chemotherapy and I'm just telling the doctors, are you ready? He's like, what? I was like, what if there is some sort of a reaction, an anaphylactic reaction, and will you be able to revive me? He was like, what is wrong with you? There's nothing going to happen. It's here in the hospital premises. Everything is going to be fine. And I was like, okay. So I can't believe I'm sharing this part of my journey on Phase Show, which is all about journalism, all about investigative journalism. And here I'm talking about mysticism. But why not? This is something that I'm exploring in my life and I want to share it with you. So where was I? So chemotherapy, So then I was like, no, this is chemo-targeted therapy. And I was like, I'm talking to my family, to my spouse. I was like, I'm not feeling it. And they're also saying that, तुम्हारा feel या भाड़ में जो ये लिखा है डॉक्टर ने ये करना ही करना है. So now I'm there and I'm taking the chemotherapy and they want me to get a port and everything. There's some port that you get. I was like, I'm not getting that port this time. Why? Because I'm not going to do chemotherapy. Do you won't do it? Man, no. As in, I won't be able to take it. He's like, how can you say it? This will be fine. This will go fine. As you just give it to me through IV. And they gave me through IV and they said, your nerves, they have become a little frail. So after 2-3 months, we'll have to put a port. And I'm like, we'll cross the bridge, but we have to. You give your first chemo. I took the first chemotherapy and I went to Chandigarh to my parents and just 2-3 days, I was like, I'm not feeling it, because I couldn't take 10 steps from year to year. Such a bad, terrible headache, popped so many dolos or whatever. Not feeling it. And then finally I told my doctor, he said, Achha, just do these tests, do your LFT, do your hemoglobin, all of that. I gave my test and I was ready for the blood test. In the morning when I got up, the first thing that I felt, this is when you say feel, each one of us has an intuition, has a gut feeling, and we are connected to our bodies first of all, and then to the world around. I was like, I feel my LFT is going to be out of range, and I was so happy about it. Because if it's out of range, then it can't. So I'm waiting for the results in the evening, and lo and behold, my LFT is out of range, skyrocketing, and my platelets have fallen, and my doctor is shocked. He's like, this was not expected, and I guess your hunch was right, chemo is not for you. And we'll go for another set of something. And I was like, I was like, when does this happen? With this LFT that has happened, has it happened only does it happen after 6 sessions, 7? He's like, people have taken 8, 10, 12, 18 sessions of it also, and things have not gone. You are one of the rare cases, very rare cases, where this has happened. So how did I do it? There's a whole process. There is an entire thing which is, I'm exploring new things. I'm exploring access consciousness. I'm exploring awareness. I'm exploring all of that, the spirituality bit of it. But the doctor changed my protocol. So I'm saying I'm going by the book, but am I seeing magic in my life? Yes, I'm seeing magic in my life. So all this might sound hocus pocus and all bullshit right now.
You're listening to your body more carefully.
But to each their own and its experience, right? So I'm going through this experience, and here I've shared with you.
It's brilliant. Do you feel, I mean, now that you've had experience with treatments, with medical care in India, there've been a lot of people who go overseas,
yes,
to get the same treatment.
Of course.
Are we getting better in India?
Yeah, of course. We've got the best of the doctors. Yeah. No, of course. We really have got the best of the doctors here. We've got the best of the infrastructure here. Of course, I think there are some issues when there's accessibility. You go abroad. If you want to take a second, third opinion, why not? You want to get your treatment there, why not? But my treatment has all been here. In fact, for this round time, I actually took an opinion from Sloan. Again, I also did a Zoom call, and they practically were talking along with the doctors here. So the head of Tata, Dr. Sudeep, he is a medical oncologist. No, they were taking his advice also.
Yeah.
So we should value our doctors more, So I think we really have the best of doctors and the best of infrastructure. And I think there's so much of population here. Why do you think there's a Sloan which has opened up in Tamil Nadu? I think Chennai. They have opened up because there's so much of population that so if more population, more number of cases, more research, more doctors, more treatments, more variety of people, more subsets, more studies, more case studies. So I think India is very well adept at sort of handling situations like this, and our doctors are great.
For all the people who are watching this right now, when they find out that someone they know, either in family or one among their friends, somebody has received a cancer diagnosis, what should they do? How do we be supportive?
Yeah.
What does that individual need at that time, and how can we provide it?
I think number one, give the person the space and time. First of all, don't bounce. I know you feel great and you feel really you're attached to that person and you mean all well, but I think as much as you are processing, the person himself or herself is also processing the information and the consequences or the treatment lines or how long it's going to take or what is going to take. So just give the space and time. Secondly, if and when you're approaching, let's try, of course, the person is going through something, and when you are calling up, she or he knows eventually that this is what you're calling up for. But how about not just directly, just jumping to it, or, it's almost make it like a life-death situation for that person. Like, अच्छा, मतलब almost like the calls have been like, तुम जिंदा रहोगी कि नहीं, ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए ना, मतलब you should not go on to that, no matter how much concerned you are. You can't sound so dramatic. And third, you also try to take the drama away from it. Now there is enough and more which is happening in the world. Forget cancer. There is the floods which are happening. There is so much happening in the world as the world order, disorder is changing. So much is happening. Earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, the crops. Cancer just happens to be one of the things happening to one of the people. So first of all, take the drama away from it. Everyone is facing something or the other in their lives. Number 2 and number 3, whatever point it is, try to be helpful in a place where you don't encroach into the private space of that person, and make yourself available for any concern, for any help, and just be there and root for the person. And then when you meet, just meet up for coffee and chai. I made it very clear to my friends that if I'm going to meet you, it's going to only be about gossip.
Yeah.
Tell me gossip, tell me about your life. It's not going to be about this. And at times you need to make steps. Like this time round I went through radiation. So after every radiation, I met one or two of my girlfriends and used to go out for coffee, talk about everything under the sun except radiation.
Yeah.
And so you just normalize everything for everyone. It takes efforts, takes thought and awareness and empathy.
I remember this really powerful photograph that you put up, which is still on your Instagram, with the scar on your back, and you had the very cool skinhead, which I loved, by the way.
So sweet.
Was the journey around your hair?
Yeah.
I find a lot of that in your poetry right now, where you're talking about self-actualization and how we look and not being so distinct with beauty. What was that journey like for someone with such gorgeous hair? Hair's everything. Hair's not everything.
Yeah,
what was it?
It's not everything.
It's not everything.
I've gone through every phase now. So the long hair, the short hair, the no hair. And I have tried to find humor in every situation. That's my only way to deal. Even if you saw the film,
Yes.
There's only humor. So there's somehow my language is different when it comes to poetry on Instagram, because it's very serious and it's very intimate, and it's a little mellow. But when it comes to writing screenplays and movies, somehow there's a funny tone. I'm always making light of the situation. So when there was a phase when there was no hair, I was like, "Sahi hai, ab to nahane mein 2 seconds lagte hain, sabun lagao and you're out of the shower." It's liberating, and it was actually.
Blow dry nahi karna padta hai.
No blow dry, no nothing. That 2 seconds when you're out of the house. How does it get better? No, but honestly speaking, there was a phase of life that I think intrinsically, every woman. And it's just not the world around. Somehow beauty has been attached with hair. There's a lot of vanity to hair, Wherever we have seen, even as kids, if you see at role models, whether it's TV serials, whether it's movies, or it's an advertisement, or a woman even buying lingerie or even leggings or even shoes, all of them have pretty long hair. It's a prerequisite for a woman to exist. Because that sort of exudes femininity. That is something which is gorgeous. So you are all brought up with all those stereotypes, and now you're living that. And now when in 2018, when the hair was just falling off, I was like, I'm done with it, and I got them shaved off. Very honestly, I was in a very high life state. And like I said, it was a joyful experience when I said the first time. But it truly was, because when I shaved my head and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I was like, who is this sexy woman? I really found myself sexy.
You really were.
Thank you. And I still am.
You still are.
So I did my whole photo shoot, and nobody at home. I'm doing my own selfies, khinch rahi hu. I'm putting different frames. So my husband also has a lot of frames, So I was putting his specs and my specs, and I was just clicking. Then I would put danglers, and I was doing my whole photo shoot on my own. And I put some of the pictures on Instagram, and I think that brought a smile to many faces.
It's interesting. Also, raising 2 kids at this point. What are you teaching your children in terms of validation, in terms of believing that your beauty comes from the inside, that you're more than your hair, you're more than your skin? And teenagers actually struggle through this a lot, right? One pimple and then they're done.
So my kids, one is just a teenager, so he's literally... But I have friends who have teenage daughters and sons, and it's a tough world for them, Because you see, if the popularity is multiplied because of social presence, social media, so is the shame. The shame is also multiplied, right? And it becomes awful for these kids to cope up. Because I think during a time, lack of social media, lack of Instagram, we had 20 friends, maximum 30. एक batch के friends हो गए. पूरी city
4 cousins थे.
4 cousins. ये थोड़ी ना था कि आपका पूरा the entire season. Right now, if you go for house parties, there are no less than 200 kids. Now, I refuse to believe that one person can actually have 200 friends. But yes, through social media, आप उसके friend हो, उसके friend हो, उसके friend हो, mutual friend है, ये है, वो है. The pressure is really a lot on these guys. Without being in the public eye, I feel they're already there in the public eye. There's so much of public on their Instagram that's actually public for them.
Yeah.
So there is nothing known as... gone are the times that only celebrities were in the public eye. A common person is also in the public eye. You look at the world of a 16-year-old. the only thing we can do is just empathize with them and just give lot of confidence at home, because they are eventually going to go into the world. They're going to have a world of their own, and the world is literally the world. It's not for us. The world was exactly what you said, 4 cousins and 20 odd people, but for them the world is the world. So how can your parenting actually has to evolve and change.
Like Australia have now banned social media accounts.
It's so good.
For anyone under the age of 16.
TikTok only, na?
TikTok, I think Instagram.
Instagram, very good. Yeah, I also
media for anyone under the age of 16, I think.
Yes, 16. Yeah, I did.
Actually sounds like a damn good idea.
It is a very good idea. I think there is...
bring back the feature phone.
Yes, absolutely.
Dial.
Or snake khelo. The only video game that you get to play is that little snake that you keep playing.
Yeah. But because, one of my friends who has a 11, 12-year-old daughter said if the rule was that none of them could have an account, that would be much easier.
That would be much easier.
But to have your child be the only one who doesn't have one.
Yeah, then they're the odd one out.
Then they're the odd one out, and then they'll turn around and say, why are you doing this to me? And as a parent, then you're not even free to make that decision.
I agree. I think the Australian government has done a great job. And I think if we can also do something like that, where at least at the age of 15, 16, the access to internet is completely curbed, and the social media, Instagram, YouTube, if there is 1% value being added, there's 99% trash which is going. And this is a generation which is just, forget them. We too, whenever we have the spare time, we are just scrolling across mindlessly. Yeah. So I think our parenting has to evolve, and this is what I'm also learning. So at the dinner table, I tell my kids, no phones, no gadgets on the phone when you're eating. And so when I am suddenly scrolling while I'm having my dinner, I'm called out. Now it's great. I have that communication where my kids tell me, Mama, you're doing the same thing,
Okay, so odd question. What makes a marriage last?
Yeah, I mean to say, this is a question I can ask you also. Yeah, you tell me.
I tell you, okay. I don't know, my husband's a genius. So but I think that the hard
He's a
thing,
genius that he's bearing with you.
He really is. No, I think that the hard realization that I've had over the last maybe year or two is that when we marry, it's all sweet and, it's all like love and physical attraction, all of that. And as you get older, this partner that you have picked will see you through the birth of your children, which is a massive upheaval. You turn into a different person overnight. You just, boom, I became a different person.
Yeah.
And the loss of your parents. So when my parent was ailing, when my dad was ailing and then I lost him, it was, I think, the hardest thing that I've ever been through. And that is really, these are the moments when you lose your job or when you have to start from scratch again, which we all have to do in our lives at some point. These are the moments when that choice of partner really comes to play. So, yes, you might have someone who leaves that towel on the floor and who is annoying in a million different ways in which we annoy our spouses on a daily basis. But when the going gets tough, that's when your partner really becomes your partner. And I think that if you're able to pull through those moments, that's what makes a marriage last. And it comes from respect.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Respect.
I think that's the
trumps.
prime. It's the trumps. That's your trump card.
That word is like ruined now, but yeah.
But I think respect, the mutual respect, I think in any relationship, if it's not there, it loses, it fizzles out.
Yeah.
So the respect has to be there through and through. And at times, you use this statement for your friends, over familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
I think you can extend the same thing with your spouse. But when you lose yourself completely in your spouse is when things are taken for granted.
Yeah.
You lose yourself and your identity. The main feature about each other was your own identity, which is why you guys got together at the first place. You don't have to become each other. We feel we have to speak like each other. We have to talk. We have to have the same point of view. We need to vote for the same party. You know, it's great to have two people who have their own mindset, they have their own identities, and yet they can get along and respect each other, and companionship. For me, along with respect, the second thing is companionship. Like you said, love comes and goes, lust comes and goes, all of that comes and goes. It's a graph depending on a estrogen, progesterone.
Yes,
Testosterone to wahi rehta hai. He eats on us. You know, but it also depends on companionship. Do you cherish each other's company for beyond your housework, beyond what's there for food, you know, beyond the conversations should extend beyond things which are needed to coexist together. When the conversations are just limited to that, then I think it's not a great situation to have. Where we're just talking about कि आज सूखने डाल दिया, आज बच्चों को पिक कर दिया, आज क्या लंच और आज क्या डिनर, आपकी बात वहीं खत्म हो जाती है.
You know, I feel like also all of the things that I would consider unhealthy in a marriage, like infidelity, domestic violence, verbal abuse, or, you know, simply WhatsApp uncles who make fun of their wives in front of other people. It all stems from disrespect. They're all forms of disrespect.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And if your partner does not respect you, then that's a battle that's been lost on day one. And respect your opinion, respect your thoughts, respect you as an entity.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And these WhatsApp jokes and this takes the saint out of me. Then I'm not fluid anymore. Because I'm done with those jokes. यार कि मुझे एक वो वाले भी jokes बहुत बड़े derogatory होते हैं. You know, you're saying that मुझे तो अपनी बीवी से बहुत डर लगता है. And then you laugh. Ha 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 ha. घर पे तो वही बनता है जो मेरी बीवी कहती है. Ha ha ha. How is it funny?
आज से तुम्हारा इंडिपेंडेंस चला गया बेटा, अभी तो तुम्हारी शादी होने वाली.
That too. That's just an age-old thing. But yeah, but I think they aren't funny anymore, you know.
Yeah, they're not funny
anymore. The same things that you're going to say. That true, respect.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. You know the scene that you wrote in Sharma Ji Ki Beti, where the young girl tells her mother that she's gay.
Yeah,
that was such a beautiful scene. It was so delicate and so well done.
So sweet.
I was meant to tell you that.
Thank you so much. No, it comes from a place of accountability. I feel there have been cases in lives and in my life too, where I feel I could have been more receptive towards other people's identities and other people what they identify as, and I wish the world becomes so chill about एक तो किसी और को आपकी sexuality साथ लेना देना क्या है ये तो मुझे पता ही नहीं है. Why do we need to tell people? Why do we owe it to people that I'm a heterosexual or I'm a homosexual or whatever? Of course, it's your family, you do confide. But I really wish there is a time and a place, and I think we are moving towards that, where the family is so chill that when the child says that I'm gay, the mother says, okay, what next? Like, move on. Like, what else is there?
Yeah.
So I just feel that the world needs to be a kinder place, and messages like this need to be reiterated time and over again, because we forget we're talking about impressionable minds, and these minds really have the capacity to be as constructive as possible and as destructive as possible too. And we have seen consequences where children have not been very kind to themselves.
Yeah.
And this is not a fad. This is not something which is happening now. People have had their own preference of whom they identify as ever since.
Yeah.
You know, and it's about time we're okay with that.
As parents, do you believe in modeling behavior where we're actually kinder to ourselves in front of our children, so our children learn to do that? Because I feel like, especially our generation, we take on so much.
Yes.
And there is this need for perfection all the time. And so we're so hard on ourselves as moms. One of the things, and I had this conversation with Karan Johar also, one of the things that worries me is when we're so concerned with, okay, I need to be fit, I need to lose weight, I need to stay on my diet, and then you get upset with yourself for not being able to do that, and you're doing it in front of a child who is learning from you.
Yeah.
It's so easy then to pass on your insecurities or to pass on your need for perfection and your anxieties as well, right?
But here's a point of view. I'm so just see if it suits you. But there's a different point of view where I feel gone are the days of being heroic parents where everything is perfect. You know, because there was a time and age where parents used to of course, cry behind closed doors, fight behind closed doors. Of course, it's always good to fight behind closed doors. You don't want your child to see any violence. First of all, there shouldn't be any violence to begin with. But I think, is it not okay to be fragile in front of your children? Is it not okay to not be perfect in front of your children? Because here you're also normalizing anxiety. You're normalizing being fearful. You're normalizing that your parent is not a hero. And the faults of your parents, you don't need to imbibe, because somehow when you portray yourself to be this heroic version of yourself who cannot falter, and even when your child calls out your faults, you sort of cover it up and you're successful in doing so because the child only understands that much, then beyond a time, even your flaws are, you know, they are sort of hyped. They're glorified because now the child doesn't know that this is a fault that my parent has. It's a character trait which I can imbibe too because my parent is perfect.
Yeah.
How about being as human as possible? It's okay to cry in front of a child. It's okay to fail. In fact, I fail and I tell my kids I'm struggling. I'm hustling right now. So don't think your father's career trajectory is the same as your mother's trajectory. And they're two different people. There are two different sets of people, there are two different challenges. And the two challenges also come with one person having a role of a father and one person having a role of a mother and who took a backseat in a career to bring you two up. You've got to acknowledge my failures. You've got to acknowledge what all I gave up. Not because I want you to hero worship me or to say thank you to me, but to know these are the choices which are there. You might want to take them or not take them. When be aware of the choices that we took, you can take other choices as well. And it's okay that your mother is failing or your father is failing or we are successful. But I think gone are the days, or at least for me, I don't want to portray the perfect version of myself, whereas I hide my vulnerability for them. I know they're going to see me hyping over me putting a lipstick. I'm okay. Like now, I during a little short break, I'm putting my lipstick in front of you. This is a new version of me. Otherwise, I would have taken, I need to go to the loo and I would have gone to the mirror and put the lipstick and not use the flush and come back. Because you're so scared that people will judge you. I'm okay. If you want to judge me, that's fine. But I just want to be myself. And perhaps in that being myself, you might just like me and you might say, okay, that's fine. If she wants to put her lipstick on, it's fine. So how does it matter? I'm just, taking this thing forward when it comes to bigger decisions in life too. So that the kids know that everything is not the end of it all, right? Like, sab kuch itna pressure dal do that I have to be right. I have to be absolutely correct. You leave little scope for the children to commit mistake. And they're allowed to commit mistake, why not? We commit mistake but we keep hiding and we keep repenting it. But we forget this is a process of being human. You're allowed to make mistakes, acknowledge and move on. But if you're going to hide and if you're going to just portray the one version of yourself, the child will never be able to come out of a shell, of their own glorified, perfect shell. Because positives, negatives, so sab mein hote hai na.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, Naina. Thank you so much for spending time with me today and having this lovely conversation. And I wish you such good luck.
Thank you so much. Wish you the same, Faye.
Thank you.